Hello and welcome to this round 13 recap video from the candidates tournament here in Berlin. It was yet another thrilling day of chess as both Fabiano Caruana and Shahryar Mamedov managed to bounce straight back from their painful defeats 2 days ago, so that was before the rest day, to today back the full point. But let's take things in order, and the first game to finish was that between Wesley So and Sergei Karyakin, which ended peacefully. Despite Wesley unleashing a novelty with b4 on move 13, he never managed to get a serious edge at any point in the game, and the draw was agreed in just under 2 hours. After the game, Sergei said that the draw was a good result for him and that he can only really comment on the tournament situation after all the other results and all 3 games, of course, were still ongoing at that point. The next one to finish was a big result for Mamedov, as he managed to beat Alexander Grishuk in what was a really interesting and intense battle, which seemed to be headed towards a fighting draw. But then Grishuk blundered just nearing the time control with knight takes b5 on move 34. Instead, knight f5 was the only move to save the position. He probably missed Shahryar's response e6, after which his position was completely winning and Alexander Grishuk resigned just 4 moves later. In the press conference, Shahryar said that he had been really devastated by his loss against Ding Liren from 2 days earlier. He said it had been his first loss with the white pieces in 18 months. He labeled it a catastrophe, said he'd slept very badly, but he seems to now be back in contention, and more about that a bit later. The next game to finish was one which saw Fabiano Caruana take back the sole lead as he overcame an ever-struggling Levon Aronian. Fabiano said afterwards that he was lucky to get his preparation up until move 15. He said he had spent numerous hours on the rest day looking at this fresh position with his second, Rustam Kazimjanov. He actually said it had been very enjoyable to look at a new position. And he also revealed that the time that wasn't spent on chess, they spent at the cinema. So it had been a good rest day for Fabiano. Going back to the game though, a lot of people, and Peter Swidler was one of them, couldn't understand Fabiano's decision not to take the bishop on g6 on move 24, instead allowing bishop h5, which initiated the piece sacrifice on g4, which we ended up seeing in the game. Although objectively the sacrifice maybe wasn't working, it posed a lot of problems, a lot of practical problems for Fabiano to solve over the board, and indeed he lost his way a little bit in the complications, and on move 31 knight takes b4 instead of e4, which was the move played by Levon, would have led to a draw, but once again those are very complex computer lines. And keep in mind that the players are playing around 13 of one of the most intense tournaments in the world with very little time on the clock. So maybe not surprising that we don't always see the first computer lines. And after Levon missed that opportunity, Fabiano's position was winning once again, and the only question was, would he be able to keep his nerve? But he did so, and won a very convincing game from there. When asked about how his nerves held up in time trouble afterwards, Fabiano smiled and said that it hadn't actually been that difficult because he had so little time on the clock, so there was no time to think about the tournament situation or what was at stake, and instead he just spent his time on finding the best moves and did so successfully in the end. Finally, the last game of the day, that between Ding Liren and Vladimir Kramnik, ended in a draw, but it was a very, very interesting game nonetheless. In fact, Peter Swidler labeled the g5 f5 idea, which was played by Vladimir Kramnik, as the most impressive thing he has seen in a while in terms of pure imagination. In fact, those couple moves and the idea behind them led to what was a very close to winning position for Vladimir Kramnik, and it looked like he was well on his way to inflicting a first defeat on Ding Liren. But then a few moves later he allowed for the queens to be exchanged, and with that his advantage evaporated and the draw was agreed shortly afterwards. So another opportunity missed for Vladimir Kramnik, but another tenacious defense by the Chinese player, who once again is still the only unbeaten player in the tournament. That of course brings us to the tournament standings going into tomorrow's all-important last round. As I mentioned previously, Fabiano Caruana is back in the sole lead. He's on 8 out of 13, followed by Karyakin and Mamedyarov, both of whom are on 7.5, and finally Ding Liren on 7. What that means is that going into the last round, all 4 of these players are still in with a shot at the first place, and of course qualifying for the match against Magnus Carlsen. I don't recall when that was last the case, having 4 players in with a chance before the final round. And now of course we need to look at the pairings. There is one clash involving 2 players fighting for first place, and that is Karyakin against Ding. Elsewhere, Caruana will be black against Gwishuk and Mamedyarov will be black against Kramnik. The only game that is irrelevant to the tournament standings is Aronian against So. Before I let you off, here's what the 4 players still in contention had to say about tomorrow's crucial last round. First off, Sergei said that today he just wanted to play solidly and that tomorrow we will see. He doesn't want to think about it too much and just play chess. That of course makes sense because at the time he said that the other 3 games were still ongoing. Next up was Shahryar Mamedyarov, who said the same thing. We will see tomorrow. I hope I will get some chance and I will try my best. Fabiano, when he was asked what his game plan for tomorrow was and how much risk he'd be willing to take, he said, I don't even know what I will do tomorrow. I will try to play a good game and hopefully that will be enough. Finally, in the last press conference of the day, Ding Liren, who of course is playing against a direct concurrent in Sergei Karyakin, said that he will just play normally and wait for his chance, because of course Sergei is gonna have to play for wins. On that note, tomorrow the last and of course all-important final round of the candidates tournament. It's going to be the most intense and the most dramatic of them all, because there can only be one winner. Games will start at the same time as usual, that is 3 p.m. Central European time, our local time here in Berlin, and I will see you then for what will be a final recap of this year's candidates tournament. But for now, that's all from me, and I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.